Good evening, brothers and sisters. How are you doing? I hope that you had a great weekend. And those who live in the Taylorsville Temple area, I hope that you enjoyed the dedication to the Taylorsville Temple. I wish I could have been with you, but like my last video said, I was laid up. Let me show you what I have to wear. So I am stuck wearing this when I leave the room, when I try and go downstairs and stuff. So it was not comfortable, nor is it convenient. It's useful. So I regret missing such a beautiful event. I hope that the prayer is published. I would love to be able to read it and see what the Spirit guides me with. If you would like to meet, if the prayer is released or the dedication is released, I don't know if they are or not, but if they are, would you like me to do a video on them? Maybe not. So I have I will be working on a video. Van Durgel, I think is how his name is pronounced. He had more questions, and I have to say, Jay, your questions are not the normal Christian videos that I get, or questions I get. I always get hostility. Yours aren't anything but hostile. And I'll mention that in my video when I do it later. But today we are going to be doing Alma chapter 18. And this is a great chapter. I mean, as I was reading it, it was like, Ammon is a master teacher. He's a faithful servant, and what he teaches is truth, no matter where you go get it from. So let's get started. So remember in the last chapter, chapter 17, Ammon is with other servants who defend the king's sheep. And it comes to the point where he has to take arms off. He has to kill people to defend the king's sheep from being scattered. Well, when he goes back, and this is where chapter 17 chapter 18 takes over. So he's listening to the king. Lamoni is listening to the all his servants telling them everything that had happened, and the king is left in shock. Seriously, I mean, he's hearing this guy has took a sling and killed people. He cut off people's arms to defend his sheep. He instructed the other servants on how to defend the sheep. And the king, after hearing all this, and he was actually shocked that Ammon couldn't be killed. He could be killed, but the king didn't see it that way. He says, the king Lamoni says these words. He says, "Now I know that it is the Great Spirit, and he hath come down at this time to preserve your lives, that I might not slay you as I did your brethren. Now, this is the Great Spirit of whom our fathers have spoken. Now, this is the tradition of the Lamanites, that they had a great spirit, but they didn't believe that the Great Spirit gave commandments. They believed in whatever they did was right. So King Lamoni killing his servants for his flocks being scattered was right in the sight of the Great Spirit. And he says, in verse 6 he says, "For I have slain many of them, because their brethren had scattered their flocks at the place of water, and thus, because they had their flocks scattered, they were slain." Now, after talking to his servants, King Lamoni asks, "Well, where is this guy? Where is he?" Well, the servant said, "Well, he's feeding your sheep and getting your chariot ready for the party." And Ammon, or not Ammon, Mormon at this time intercedes, and he said that now the king had commanded his servants previous to the time of watering the flocks that they should prepare his horses, chariots, and conduct him forth to the land of Nephi. For there was a great feast appointed at the land of Nephi by the father of Lamoni, who is king over all the land. So, hearing this, that Ammon was getting his chariots ready and his horses ready, was shocked at how faithful of a servant Ammon was. He says, "Surely there has not been any servant among all my servants that have been so faithful as this man, for even he doth remember all my commandments to execute them." And then he adds this, "Now I know that this is the Great Spirit, and I would desire him that he should come unto me, but I durst not." Okay, so after Ammon had been done with preparing the chariot and feeding the horses, getting them ready, he decided to return to the king. And when sorry, my allergies are starting to act up. Give me one moment. As he was going into the where the king is, he noticed that the king's countenance had changed, and he was about to leave when one of the servants stopped him and said, "Rabbana," which is being interpreted powerful or great king, considering their king to be powerful. Thus he being said unto him, "Rabbana, the king desireth thee to stay." So Ammon says, "Okay, I'll stay." And he says, Ammon turns himself to the king and says, "What wilt thou that I should do for thee, O king?" Now, the king was very nervous because he thinks he's dealing with a deity. He thinks he's dealing with the Great Spirit. So he doesn't say anything for an hour. An hour. Can you believe that? I don't have that type of patience to just stand there and wait for someone to talk to me for an hour. No. Ammon is far better man than I am. If you're not talking to me within 5 minutes, I'm ready to leave. But Ammon stays. And after the hour, Ammon finally speaks up and says, "What desirest thou of me, Well, the king still doesn't respond. Now, Ammon, having the Spirit of God with him, perceives the thoughts of the king. And he says, "Is it because thou hast heard that I defended thy flocks and defended thy servants and thy flocks, and slew 7 of their brethren with slings and with sword, and smote off their arms and of others, in order to defend your flocks?" He says, "Behold, is it this that causeth thy marvelings?" Well, I'm sure at that time the king had already looked kind of palish because he felt he was dealing with the deity. But when Ammon perceived his thoughts and even told him what he was thinking, the king must have turned 3 shades of white, each one being more and more shocking. And the king finally opens his mouth and says, "Art thou that great Spirit who knoweth all things?" And he said, "How is it you know my heart? How do you know my thoughts?" And he says, "Tell me, by what power ye slew and smote off the arms of my brethren that scattered my flock?" And then he pops up, and the king continues. He says, "If thou wilt tell me concerning these things, whatsoever thou desirest, I will give unto thee. And if it were needed, I would guard thee with my armies. But I know that thou art more powerful than all they. Nevertheless, whatsoever thou desirest of me, I will grant it unto you." So the king, I don't think he knew what Ammon was going to ask. And rightfully so, because it would change the king's life forever with what Ammon wanted to show. And Ammon, being wise as a serpent, gentle as a sheep, it doesn't say it there. He says to the king, "Wilt thou hearken unto my words, even if I tell thee by what power I do these things?" And this is the thing he desires. He doesn't desire wealth, gold, jewels, power. He just wants the king to listen to him. He wants a chance to do missionary work with the king. That is the intent of his heart. That tells you what kind of man Ammon is. He just wants to preach the gospel. That's it. It's pure and simple. Gotta love it. So the king, since he said this, he says, "Yes, I will believe all thy words." And thus he was caught with guile. So, let's see here. So guile is a sly or cunning intelligence. And Ammon become to ask questions. First question, dost thou believe in God? Well, the Lamanites, I guess, don't have this concept of God. So Lamoni's like, "I don't understand what you mean by this." He says, Ammon responds, "Dost thou believe in the Great Spirit?" And the king says, "Yes." And then he asks, and this is a back and forth for a while. Ammon asks, or says, this is God. And he says, ask them if he believes that God had created all heaven and earth, and that King Lamoni says, yes, I believe these things. But then King Lamoni asks, is heaven above the earth? And he says, yes. And the question that I love here, in 33, it says, and King Lamoni said, art thou sent from God? That is probably the best question, in my opinion, that he asked. And he says, I am a man, and man in the beginning was created after the image of God, and I am called by his Holy Spirit to teach these things unto this people, that they may be brought to the knowledge of that which is just and true. And he says, a portion of that Spirit dwells in me and gives me this knowledge. So at this point, Ammon starts reciting everything that from the time of the creation until Lehi left Jerusalem. Also of the going on of the Nephite nation, or the Nephites and Lamanites, from this time down. He expounds the plan of redemption as taught by King Mosiah and other prophets. And it came to pass after all this time, I mean, this must have taken hours and hours. The king believes. He believes that this is all true. Now, after hearing all this, King Lamoni says the following: O Lord, have mercy according to thy abundant mercy, which thou hast had upon the people of Nephi. Have upon me and my people. And after he says this, the king collapses. He falls to the earth as if he was dead. And now, the servants contacted the king's wife, the queen, and told them all that had happened. And the queen, all the children came together to see what there happened to the husband. Well, they put him, according to the traditions of the Lamanites, they put him at display for 2 days and 2 nights, where they mourned over the loss of their father. And this is the end of chapter 18. We're left with King Lamoni down on the ground as if he was dead. The queen and all the children were mourning his loss. Tomorrow, we'll go over this. Go over chapter 19, which will reveal more stuff. So, with that, my brothers and sisters, I thank you for joining me. Remember that I love you, and I pray for you continually, and that your journey with Christ is as glorious as it is with me. You guys have a wonderful week.